If you are a developer working on the AI field, you're very familiar with OpenAI API. This is the way we can interact with ChatGPT via an API programmatically. And I would say that most AI applications are really a wrapper on top of ChatGPT API. So in this video, we're going to see an alternative to that, an open source project that lets you run your own custom language models without losing compatibility with your existing API calls. So the first thing we should ask ourselves is why go to the trouble of setting up a local private language model? I think there are three reasons. The first one is cost. If you have an application that's popular and is using very heavily the OpenAI API, the cost can rise very quickly, and there's a point in which it makes more sense to rent or buy your own hardware and run your own model. So there's a scaling aspect to this. There's also privacy, which is, I think, the biggest reason, because there's some use cases in which you cannot use closed source models because that cannot leave your system, and running your own language model allows you to keep everything within your data center. And the last reason, I think, is because you may want to experiment with open source models. They are coming every day, new models. You can find maybe models that suit your use case better with less resources. So you may want to use one of these models instead of being locked into one of the OpenAI supported models. So in a previous video, we saw that running a language model is not hard at all. If you need help with that, be sure to check that video first and then come back. So today we're going to check out LocalAI. This is an open source project that aims to be a drop-in replacement for OpenAI. It has a lot of features. You can use it as a chat model. You can even use function calling that lets you integrate with other parts of your system. You have text-to-speech and audio-to-text. You can do image generation. You can index documents. There's a model gallery you can pull from Hugging Face. This is the largest repository for open source models, so you have a lot of choices. Also, you have a Vision API, and there's a lot of an ecosystem of mods, plugins, and if you have a GPU, you can accelerate your model with GPU, but you can even run these models without a CPU. So architecture-wise, LocalAI presents an OpenAI compatible API. You can connect to that API, or your products or project or application can connect to that API. Behind that, there's the LocalAI engine, which is written in Go, and it can connect with a lot of different models via plugins and extensions. So you can have, for example, an image generator with stable diffusion. You can have a llama language model, so you can hit external APIs also, and you can run everything in your command line or in a container or in Kubernetes for additional scale. So this is the LocalAI website. The first thing we need to go is to go to the getting started section, and we have a few options here to run. If we are running on an Intel chip, on an x86 chip, we can directly execute this with Docker or Docker Compose, or of course Kubernetes. These are all valid options if you're running on Intel chips. So the only thing you have to keep in mind is that you have to download a model, and this image weighs around 30 gigabytes, so it's a big image, so you have to have a lot of memory and a lot of disk space. But if you are like me and running on Apple Silicon, running using Docker is not the best option because there's an emulation layer. So in my case, for an M1 chip, I would need to go to here to build instructions and basically clone and build the application. Just keep in mind there's a few options if you are going to build to enable GPU. There's also different versions of the Docker image, depending if you have a GPU machine or not, so you have to pick the right Docker image. So what I'm going to do first is to build LocalAI in my machine to test it, and then we are going to do some trials. Following the instructions from the website, I downloaded and clone the repository. I built the LocalAI binary and downloaded a couple of models. This come by default. This is small models that run in GPT4All, which is an open source alternative to ChatGPT. And I also downloaded a Llama 2 model from Hugging Face. We are going to test it next. So to start the API server, we're going to call LocalAI, pass the models path, the directory containing the models, and after a few seconds, we should have the API server ready. There it is. So let's open a different terminal and test the endpoint with curl. For example, we can call the models endpoint and it will show us the available models. Or we can simply send a request to the model. Here we are hitting the local endpoint and we're sending the payload with a message basically saying how are you. And after a few seconds we have the answer. As you can see here, we had to specify the model. This is the basic model and the answer is here. Basically we are getting a message, a response from the model. So this is using the regular OpenAI API format, and we are not inventing anything new here. We're just using a local service instead of the OpenAI endpoint. Let's see how is the procedure to add a model to LocalAI. Let's go to Hugging Face, and we're going to go to models. We're going to filter here. For example, let's say I want a Llama 2. For example, let me filter by format. GGOF is a good format for downloading. Seems like a good example. So here we have the model card and we can download the file directly from here. There are different versions depending on the quantization of the model. We can download the simplest, the smallest one here, and we're going to try it with LocalAI. So once we downloaded the file, we go to the LocalAI/models and I copied the file here, and it's a good idea to create a second file which is named like the model but with the extension tmpl, and we can take a look at the existing template files. This is the one that comes with LocalAI, and we can adapt this. For example, this is what the model will receive when it boot up, like the instructions that are added before any user interaction. So in this case, for example, I supplied that you're a language model that you're trying to emulate ChatGPT responses, so it would try to act more like a ChatGPT API, but you can put anything you want here. So we might need to restart the LocalAI if we added a model. So now that it has started with the two models, we can go here and query the models, and we should see here that this model is available. So let's try querying this new model. We can send a curl request, and the difference here is that we had put in the model field basically the model file name with the extension. So this should create a more complex response because it's a larger model. Here we have the answer. It took a while, like 3 minutes to complete. It's running on a very limited machine, but it works. It's a relatively big model for my machine at least, but yeah, it's quite funny the response from the model here. We know that the endpoint works. Let's try interacting with the local endpoint using the OpenAI Python library. Let's create a new file. So first we import the OpenAI library. This is the one we would normally use to interact with OpenAI. Then we need to change the base URL. So instead of querying the OpenAI servers, we use the local server. And then we need an API key. We can put it here or as an environment variable. But as you can see, it's not a valid key, but we need to put something because otherwise the library will fail, will throw an error. So we can put anything here. It's not a secret, it's just a filler. Then we're going to complete the code. We are going to call this model and then send a message, and print the output. So let's test it out. A few minutes later, we have our response. This is pretty good response from the model. It took like 3 or 4 minutes, but remember we are using a laptop as an engine. So by changing only to this line of code, we made this simple change made our application work with the local AI. So migrating an existing application, it's really easy. It's just a matter of changing the base URL and testing it out. So for my next and last test, I want to run a Chatbot UI and try to connect with LocalAI. This is a project that's designed to work with OpenAI first. So let's see if I can make it work with my local server. We're going to start by installing the chatbot by cloning the repository. Have cloned the repository and installed the libraries with npm install. Now I need to export two variables. One is the OpenAI API key. This is the filler API key, and then the API host. This is we are overriding the default host for the model. We are using a local model, which is already running in a different terminal. So in order to provide a compatibility layer with OpenAI, we need to start the local AI server with an option. In this case, we need to define an environment variable called preload models. And this variable, basically, it says that the GPT-3 turbo model will be replaced with this URL. This is the basic model that comes with LocalAI. So basically what we are saying to LocalAI is we are going to replace the GPT Turbo that the UI expects with our own model, and we can have a list of models here, and we can have as many models as we want. And if we have this variable defined, it's going to check if the models are installed. If they're installed and cached, it will just start, and if they're missing, it will automatically download them into the models directory. So now the server is ready. Let's start the UI. Now we can start the development server. Here we are on the UI. We have only the GPT-3 model available. This is the only one we enabled in the galleries. Let's test it out. It has started generating an answer, and the streaming support works, so it works very similarly to GPT. Obviously it's much slower, but if I had a more powerful machine, it would work better. But this is a client that's designed specifically for OpenAI, and we could, using model galleries and by changing the endpoint, we could change basically and replace OpenAI with our own machine and our own language model. And that's all. We were able to replace OpenAI with our own language model. So whether you're a hobbyist looking to experiment with open source models and try your code with different models, or if you are a developer seeking to integrate these technologies in your projects, if you need a private language model, you can have that. You can have the API. You don't need to rewrite your code. You can use your existing code and simply change the backend. So LocalAI presents a very good alternative. Obviously, you will need some powerful hardware and you need a lot of time to test and maybe fine-tune your models, but it's a great start. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video so you don't miss the next one. If you have any questions or want to see more content like this, leave me a message below. So until next time, see you.